Hi everybody, here again for chapter 3. And chapter 3 of Matilda is called The Hat and the Superglue. So we've met Matilda and she isn't really liked by her family. She's very different from them. She loves reading, she's super intelligent, and her parents just don't really appreciate that. So she has now made a decision. Every time they do something that upsets her, she's going to play a trick on them, a prank on them. So let's see what she gets up to. You ready, Charlie? You guys all ready? Enjoy. The following morning, just before Father had left his beastly second-hand car garage, Matilda slipped into the cloakroom to get hold of the hat he wore each day to work. She had to stand on her toes and reach up high with a walking stick so she could reach it. She took the hat off the peg, and she only just made it. The hat itself was one of those flat-top pork pie jobs with Jay's feather stuck into the hat band, and Mr. Wormwood was very proud of it. He thought it gave him a rakish, daring look, especially when he wore it at an angle with his loud check jacket and a green tie. Matilda, holding the hat in one hand and a thin tube of superglue in the other, proceeded to squeeze a line of glue very neatly all round the edge of the rim of the hat. Then she carefully hooked the hat back onto the peg with a walking stick. She timed the operation very carefully, applying the glue just so that her father was getting up from the table. Mr. Wormwood didn't notice anything when he put the hat on. Superglue is very powerful stuff. So powerful it will take your skin off if you pull it too hard. Mr. Wormwood didn't want to be scalped, so he had to keep the hat on his head all day long, even when putting the sawdust in the gearboxes. Even when putting the sawdust in the gearboxes and fiddling the mileage of cars with his electric drill. In an effort to save face, he adopted the casual attitude of hoping that his staff would think he'd actually meant to keep them on. When he got home that evening, he still couldn't get his hat off. "Don't be silly," his wife said. "Come here, I'll take it off for you." She gave the hat a sharp yank. Mr. Wormwood let out a yell that rattled the window panes. "Ow!" he screamed. "Don't do that! Let go, you'll take off half my forehead." Matilda, nestling in her usual chair, was watching this performance over the rim of her book with some interest. "What's the matter, Daddy?" she said. "Has your head suddenly swollen or something?" The father glared at his daughter with deep suspicion, but said nothing. "How could it be?" Mrs. Wormwood said to him. "It must be superglue. It couldn't be anything else. That'll teach you to go playing round and nasty stuff like that. I expect you were trying to stick another feather in your hat." "I haven't touched the flaming stuff," Mr. Wormwood shouted. He turned and looked again at Matilda, who looked back at him with large, innocent brown eyes. "You should read the label on the tube before you start messing around with dangerous products. Always follow the instructions on the label." "What in heaven's name are you talking about, you stupid witch?" Mr. Wormwood shouted, clutching the brim of his hat to stop anyone trying to pull it off again. "Do you think I'm stupid and I glued this thing to my head on purpose?" Matilda said, "There's a boy down the road who got some superglue on his finger without knowing it, and then put his finger to his nose." Mr. Wormwood jumped. "What happened to him?" he spluttered. "The finger got stuck inside his nose," Matilda said, "and he had to go around like that for a week. People kept saying to him, 'Stop picking your nose,' and he couldn't do anything about it. He looked like a fool." "Served him right," Mrs. Wormwood said. "He shouldn't have put his finger up there in the first place. It's a nasty habit. If children had superglue put on their fingers, they'd soon stop doing it." Matilda said, "Grown-ups do it too, Mummy. I saw you doing it in the kitchen yesterday." "That's quite enough from you," said Mrs. Wormwood, turning pink. Mr. Wormwood had to keep his hat on all through supper in front of the television. He looked ridiculous and stayed very silent. He went up to bed and tried again to get the thing off, and so did his wife, but it wouldn't budge. "How am I going to have my shower?" he demanded. "You'll just have to do it with that on your head, won't you?" his wife told him. And later on, as she watched her skinny little husband sulking around the bedroom in his purple striped pyjamas and his pork pie hat on his head, she thought how stupid he looked. Hardly the kind of man a wife dreams about. Mr. Wormwood discovered that the worst thing about having a permanent hat on his head was having to sleep in it. It's impossible to lie comfortably on the pillow. Now, do stop fussing around, his wife said to him after he'd been tossing and turning for about an hour. I expect it'll be loose by the morning. But it wasn't loose by the morning, and it wouldn't slip off. So Mrs. Wormwood took a pair of scissors and cut the whole thing off. Bit by bit, first the top, then the brim. Where the inner band had stuck to the hair all around the sides and the back, she had to chop the hair off right next to his skin, so that he finished up with a bold white ring around his head, like some sort of a monk. But in the front, there had a band that was stuck directly to the bare skin, which remained a whole lot of small patches of brown leathery stuff, and no amount of washing would get them off. At breakfast, Matilda said to him, "You must try to get those bits off your forehead, Daddy. It looks as though you've grown little brown insects crawling all over you. People will think you've got lice." "Be quiet," the father snapped. "Just you'll keep your nasty mouth shut, will you?" All in all, it was the most satisfactory exercise, but it was surely too much to hope that it had taught her father a permanent lesson. I'm going to go on to chapter 4, The Ghost. There was a comparative calm in the Wormwood household for about a week after the superglue episode. The experience had clearly chastened Mr. Wormwood, and he seemed temporarily to have lost his taste for boasting and bullying. Then suddenly he struck again. Perhaps he had a bad day at the garage, and he had not sold enough crummy second-hand cars. There were many things that make a man irritable when he arrives home from work, and that evening a sensible wife will usually notice all the storm signals and will leave him alone until he simmers down. When Mr. Wormwood arrived back from the garage that evening, his face was dark as a thundercloud. That somebody was clearly for the high jump pretty soon. His wife recognised the signs immediately and made herself scarce. He then strode into the living room. Matilda happened to be curled up in the armchair in the corner, absorbed in a book. Mr. Wormwood switched on the television. The screen lit up. The programme blared. Mr. Wormwood glared at Matilda. She hadn't moved. She had somehow trained herself by now to block her ears to the ghastly sound of the dreadful box. She kept on reading, and for some reason this infuriated her father. Perhaps his anger was intensified because he saw her getting pleasure from something that was beyond his reach. "Don't you ever stop reading," he snapped at her. "Oh, hello, Daddy," she said pleasantly. "Did you have a good day?" "What is this trash?" he said, snatching the book from her hands. "It isn't trash, Daddy. It's lovely. It's called The Red Pony. It's by John Steinbeck, an American writer. Why don't you try it? You'll love it." "Filth," Mr. Wormwood said. "If it's about an American, it's certainly filth. That's what they write about." "No, Daddy, it isn't. It's beautiful. Honestly, it's about—" "I don't want to know what it's about," Mr. Wormwood barked. "I'm fed up with your reading anyway. Go and find yourself something useful to do." With frightening suddenness, he now began ripping out the pages of the book in handfuls and throwing them in the wastepaper basket. Matilda froze in horror. Her father kept going, and there seemed little doubt that the man felt some kind of jealousy. How dare she? He seemed to be enjoying the rip of each page of the book. How dare she enjoy reading books when he couldn't? How dare she? "That's a library book," Matilda cried. "It doesn't belong to me. I have to return it." "Then you'll have to buy another one, won't you?" the father said, still tearing out the pages. "You'll have to save your pocket money until your precious Mrs. Phelps, won't you?" With that, he dropped the new empty covers of the book into the basket and marched out of the room, leaving the telly blaring. Most children in Matilda's place would have burst into floods of tears. She didn't do this. She sat there, very still, and very white and thoughtful. She seemed to know that either crying or sulking would get her anywhere. The only sensible thing to do when you're attacked is, as Napoleon once said, to counterattack. Matilda's wonderfully subtle mind was already at work devising yet another plan. The plan was now beginning to hatch in her mind, but it depended, however, upon whether or not Fred's parrot was really as good talker as Fred made out. Fred was a friend of Matilda's. He was a small boy, he was 6, and he lived just around the corner from them. For days he'd been talking about his parrot his father had given him. So, the following afternoon, as soon as Mrs. Wormwood had departed in her car for another session of bingo, Matilda set out for Fred's house to investigate. She knocked on his door and asked if he could be kind enough to show her his famous bird. Fred was delighted and let her up to his bedroom, where the truly magnificent blue and yellow parrot sat in a tool cage. "There it is," Fred said. "His name is Chopper." "Make it talk," Matilda said. "You can't make it talk," Fred said. "You have to be patient. It will talk when it feels like it." They hung around waiting. Suddenly the parrot said, "Hello, hello, hello." It was exactly like a human voice. Matilda said, "That's amazing. What else can it say?" "Rattle my bones," the parrot said, giving the wonderful imitation of a spooky voice. "Rattle my bones." "He's always saying that," Fred told her. "What else can he say?" Matilda asked. "That's about it," Fred said. "But it's pretty marvellous, don't you think?" "It's fabulous," Matilda said. "Will you lend him to me for just one night?" "No," Fred said, "certainly not. I'll give you all my next week's pocket money." "Please," said Matilda. That was different. Fred thought about that for a few seconds. "All right then, if you promise to return him tomorrow." Matilda staggered back to her own empty house, carrying the tall cage in both hands. There was a large fireplace in the dining room, and she now set about wedging the cage up the chimney and out of sight. This wasn't so easy, but she managed it in the end. "Hello, hello, hello!" a bird called down to her. "Hello, hello!" "Shut up, you nut," Matilda said, as she went out to wash up the soot off her hands. That evening, while the mother and father and the brother and Matilda were having supper as usual in the living room in front of the television, a voice came loud and clear from the dining room across the hall. "Hello, hello, hello!" it said. "Harry?" cried the mother, turning white. "There's someone in the house. I just heard a voice." "So did I," the brother said. And he jumped up to switch off the telly. "Shh! Listen!" They all stopped eating and sat there for a second. "Hello, hello, hello!" came the voice. "There it is!" cried the brother. "It's burglars!" hissed the mother. "They're in the dining room." "I think they are," father said, sitting tight. "Then go and catch them, Harry," hissed the mother. "Go and get them." The father didn't move. He seemed in no hurry to be a hero. His face turned grey. "Get on with it," hissed the mother. "They're probably after the silver." The husband wiped his lips nervously with his napkin. "Why don't we all go and look together?" "Come on then," said the brother. "Let's go." "They're definitely in the dining room," Matilda whispered. "I'm sure they are." The mother grabbed a poker from the fireplace, and the father took a golf club. The brother seized a table lamp, and ripping the plug out of the socket, Matilda took the knife that she'd been eating with. All four of them crept towards the dining room, the father doing well to keep behind the others. "Hello, hello, hello!" came the voice again. "Come on," Matilda cried as she burst into the room, brandishing her knife. "Stick 'em up!" she yelled. "We've caught you!" The others followed her, waving their weapons. Then they stopped. They stared around the room, but no one was there. "There's no one here," the father said, greatly relieved. "I heard him, Harry," the mother shrieked, still quaking. "I distinctly heard his voice." So did you." "I'm certain I heard him," Matilda cried. "He's in here somewhere." She began searching behind the sofa, behind the curtains. Then came the voice again, soft and spooky this time. "Rattle my bones," it said. "Rattle my bones." They all jumped, including Matilda, who was a pretty good actress. They stared around the room. There was still no one there. "It's a ghost," Matilda said. "Heaven help us," cried the mother, clutching her husband round his neck. "I know it's a ghost," Matilda said. "I've heard it here before. This room is haunted. I thought you knew that." "Save us!" Mother screamed, almost throttling her husband. "I'm getting out of here," Father said, greyer than ever. They all fled, slamming the door behind them. The next afternoon, Matilda managed to get rather sooty and a grumpy parrot down from the chimney and out of the house without being seen. She carried it all the way to the back door and ran all the way to Fred's house. "Did he behave himself?" Fred asked her. "We had a lovely time," Matilda said. "My parents adored him." Okay, that's the end of chapter 4. Chapter 5 is called Arithmetic, and I will read that one tomorrow. So we hope you have a nice day, and we will see you tomorrow.